putting together the bag for Simplicity 8037. So we're going to do, following the directions that we have with the pattern, we are going to prepare the outside of the bag first, starting with pattern piece number 11. And pattern piece number 11 is this one right here. It's your pocket center, and you had to cut 2 out of it. And if you cut out 2, it tells you in the directions with the wrong sides together, and this would be your wrong side. This is your wrong side, this is your right side. With your wrong sides together, you're going to line it up, line up your raw edges, and you're going to match up your marks. So for me, I do slits. Whenever there's a triangle, I do a slit so that I can see the marks that I need to make, so I don't have anything poking out. Some people, when they come across those lots, when you're cutting, they like to mark out triangles and they cut a triangle out. But I don't do triangles, I do slits. So I matched up my slits, I folded my pieces together. You need to do that for both pieces. And I ironed everything flat, so I've got a good crease here at the top of each of my pieces right here. So we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to do a stitch 1/4 inch away from the top, and we're going to do a basting stitch, which means a long stitch here on the sides so that things won't come apart. So I'm going to go stitch these 2 pieces together, and then we'll put these pieces on top of the outside of our bag. Okay, now that we have our pockets taken care of, we are going to match up our pocket, the parts that are marked with the triangles or with the slits. We're going to match up the slits from the pocket to the slits in the bottom of our bag on the outside. Okay, so we're going to do that for both of our pieces. Okay, so now that we have those done for both pieces, we have both pieces here. Let's move on to our next step. So our next step says pin the pocket to the center front, matching dots, raw edges even, baste. Okay, so it wants us to go back and to sew the pockets on. We're going to baste them with a long stitch, so that we're just going to do the edges right here so that the pocket will stay on. So now we'll put our right sides together, just like this, matching up our edges and our marks. So down here, there should have been marks here on the side. You're going to match those up, just like that. And if your interfacing is a little bigger, you can trim that down if you want. See how mine is just a little bit longer than the edge, but I'm not worried about it because I can still match up my fabric together. So I'll match up all my marks and pin it up. According to the directions, all they want you to sew is the side seams. So you're going to start at the top, you're going to back stitch, and you're going to sew to that first dot, and you're going to back stitch right there. Then you're going to come down to the second dot, you're going to stitch a couple of stitches and go back a couple of stitches, so you're going to back stitch to reinforce the seam, and you're going to stitch all the way down to the bottom. And that's where you're going to stop until our next step. Okay, so now I have right sides together and sewn together, and we have a hole right here that's eventually going to be our casing to put our drawstring through. So that's been done. So now we're going to set this one aside, and we're going to go on to our next step. And our next step says, with piece 12, we're going to do the same thing that we did to our center pocket. So this is piece number 12. And you're going to fold it just like that, wrong sides together, which I've done right here. So wrong sides together, and you're going to iron everything flat so you have a nice crease for both of them. So you need 2 pieces of this. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch stitch right across the top here, and then I'm going to come down here to this part, and we need to sew that dart together in order to put this pocket onto the outer of our bag. So a 1/4 inch here, and then we're going to take our edges here and we're going to fold them to the inside, and we're going to match up our raw edges and our points, and we're just going to put a pin in it so it won't fall apart. And then what we're going to do, we're going to start here and we're going to do a 1/4 inch all the way down, and that'll be our dart. So now what we're going to do, we're going to lay this on top of our outer fabric. So we're going to take this and we're going to flip it inside out. This is what the outside looks like. This would be the front and back. So we're going to take it and flip it to the side. So now we're going to line up our pockets to our marks here on the outside. So we're going to match up, so corner to corner is going to be matched. This corner to this pocket will be matched like that. And I'm going to stick my hand here on the inside so I don't go through all of it, but just pin the outers. We're going to follow that all the way down and match up this corner right here, and making sure we leave this part alone, but just grabbing that top layer right there. We're going to go back and we're going to go stitch down this side, around the bottom, and this side right here to be able to keep everything pinned down. And we're going to flip it over and do it to the other side. Alright, now I have my outer pockets attached to the outside of my bag, and you might find sometimes no matter how carefully you cut out your pattern pieces, there's still going to be bits that tend to miss. So for example, right here, see that gap right there? I cut it out as good as I could, and I'm still getting a gap right there. But if I lay it flat, it matches up with the back side, so there's no wrinkles in it. But I don't know, I'm not quite sure what I did right there. But it's okay, because that's going to be covered up by our straps, which is what we're going to work on next. So we're going to pull out our instructions, and we're going to do our handles. So I'm going to set this one aside. Fold handle in half lengthwise with right sides together, raw edges even, and stitch a 1/4 inch, leaving the ends open. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to take our handle with the right sides of our fabric together, matching the raw edges. We're going to pin and stitch. Okay, now that I've got my handle with the right sides together, pinned up, I'm going to do the same thing for the second one. And also to let you know that this is the same way that you would do your drawstring. But if you do the drawstring, it's the same way. You cut the wrong rectangle out, right sides together, you sew up the edge, and then you flip and turn the ends. But for the handles, we're not going to do that. We're just going to pin, and we're going to sew the long seam all the way down. we're back, and I have the straps done. But I wanted to show you guys this one. See the wrinkles in this strap? See how it kind of twists within, and that wrinkle right there? This is just to show you guys that for this strap, I had no problem sewing it. It was cut on the grain, and it sewed up with no wrinkle, wrinkle-free. This one was cut slightly off. I didn't realize I was off the grain, and so when I sewed, it started off fine here at the beginning. Let me put that out of the way so we can focus. It started out fine. Then as I went, it started to twist, and it started to wrinkle, and you can see the pull lines there, that I'm slightly off grain. And if I'm off grain, it's not going to lay flat. And when the presser foot presses on it and pushes the fabric together, the fabric starts to shift, and all of a sudden the top layer here has shifted down just enough to give me a wrinkle right there and all the way down. So there's wrinkles right there, and then it evened out at the end. So somewhere here in the middle of my handle strap, I got off grain, and now I have those wrinkles there. But I'm not going to let that stop me. If I was making clothing, I would be more concerned about it. Because I'm just making this bag, I'm not going to worry about it right now. So, moving on, we are going to, looking at my instructions as we go. Okay, so we're going to turn our handles right side out, bringing the seam to the center, and then we're going to press it. So once it gets pressed out, we'll be okay. So this is what I do. I have one of these. It's a dowel. It comes in a pack of, if you get polyfill stuffing for stuffed animals and toys, there's usually a stick in there, or just use a chopstick if you have one. And because these handles are wide enough, I probably don't actually need this, and we're just going to turn it to the inside. And you can actually see how I do this on my bag making videos. I have my tote bag video. I show you how to do this as well, and I'll put a link up here in the corner so that you can see, which corner is it? This one? It's either this one or this one. I can't remember which one. But on how, if you want to get a better look at it, you can check out my tote bag videos. So I'm going to quickly flip the handles inside out. Okay, so now that we've got them turned right inside out, we're going to take it and we're going to go lay it on the ironing board like this. So we want the seam hidden behind the handle. So we're going to lay it just like this. We're going to lay our handle down, we're going to put our seam in the middle, and we're going to press. So we're going to go press this flat on both the handles. So I'm going to do that for both of them, and Alright, now that I have my handles all ironed flat with the center seam allowance, or the center seam I should say, the center seam's in the back, it's been ironed flat to the best of my abilities. There might be somewhat wrinkling to it, but that's alright, I'm not worried about that. So what we're going to do now is move on with our next step, and we're going to attach our handles to the outside of our bag. So what we're going to do, we're going to line up our handles with the bottom of the bag as well as matching up our dots. Now remember in a prior video when we were preparing the fabric, I had put my marks on the opposite side. Well, my air soluble marker, all my marks have disappeared. But that's okay. My marks have disappeared, but using my directions and marks on my fabric, I can line everything up. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay it out flat as we can get, and we're going to use our main pattern piece. And by using our main pattern piece, we're going to line this up with the marks on the fabric, with the marks on our pattern, and figure out where the dots are supposed to be so that we can remark them and then line up our straps where they're supposed to be. So going by the bottom marks, the two triangles that we've either cut or slit, I'm going to match those up to the slits or triangles at the bottom, which is right here, which should also line you up here in the darts. So if you have that lined up, then you can look through the tissue paper because it's thin enough. You should be able to see your seam lines right here and where your marks are supposed to be. So I'm going to remark, and if you look, the small dots show you where the top of your pockets are supposed to be. So if they line up right there or as close to right there, you've done a good job. So we're going to remark our big dots. And I'm not going to remark our bottom dots because it's on a black fabric, but I am going to lay our strap. So if we've done it right, we've cut it out right, you can see our strap fits just in between those lines. And so we did our straps correct as well. So what we're going to do, we're going to lay out our fabric. It's going to cover that seam right there from this pocket and that pocket, and we're going to sew it to right here. And I'm going to mark that as well. So even though we have dots, I'm going to mark that so that we know where to stop. And it's going to come over here on this side as well. Okay, so now that we've marked both of our handles there, we have the marks where we're supposed to stop on the handles, and we have the marks where we're supposed to stop here on the outside of our fabric. I'm going to remark it just in case. Let's see if it's good. So yeah, I've got 2 marks there, and I've got 2 marks there. So I'm going to set this aside, and we're going to take one handle strap, and we're going to line it up at the bottom, and we're going to match up the marks on our handle with the marks in the top and roll it straight down to the bottom. Now, I don't know if you remember, I showed you just a moment ago how this one was slightly off, but our handle is wide enough to cover that difference. And we're going to be stitching right here on the very edge of that handle, down this side and down this side, and that's how the handle is attached. So I'm going to pin this in place for both handles. We're going to sew it on. I'm going to flip it to the other side, and we're going to do the same thing for the other side. Alright, now that I've got that pinned, one of the things I want to say is that if your marks happen to disappear, remark them so that you don't have to worry about that. And also, before you start sewing, start at the same place each time you sew. So if you start sewing from the top and you go down, so if you start sewing here and go down this edge, start from here and go down this edge. Because if you start here and go down this edge and then go back to do the second seam and go the opposite way, it's going to shift your fabric and you're going to have these little diagonal wrinkles going this way. So whenever you sew, start and stop in the same place. So start here and go here, or start here and go here. Never do the opposite because you will get diagonal wrinkles, and we don't want wrinkles at all, as much as we can prevent them. So Alright, so we have our handles sewn onto our bag, and as you notice, they're nice and straight. There's no warping here in the fabric because I started at the bottom. I started at the bottom and I sewed both lines. Excuse me. I started at the bottom and I sewed both lines in the same direction, so there was no warping of the fabric. Our next step is, and I've done it on this handle already, is to sew the middle of the handle. So what we're going to do, we are going to, and before I do this, I want to show you something real quick. You don't sew it all the way down. You sew it as far down as you can get that it still allows the bag to lay flat. Because if you sew it all the way down, then you're going to get a wrinkle right here behind your handle, and that's not a part of the bag. So your fabric needs to lay flat. So it's about an inch from this seam to the bottom of this seam, an inch and a quarter, that I stopped out on both handles, just because we want to be able to have our bag lay flat in this area. So for our handle, what I did, I started in the middle, and you just fold it over and pin. Now, what I did also for this particular handle is that I started sewing in the middle and sewed to each edge. And what that does, that also prevents any type of warping of the fabric. So if I decided to start here and sew all the way down, the warping of the fabric, there could be warping of the fabric that would end up causing wrinkles or shifting, and it would end up bunching over here on this side. So to prevent that, I start in the middle of the handle. So when I sew, I start here and I sew this way. And then I come back and I start here and I overlap right here and I sew this way. That way, when you have the handle, it's nice and flat and there's no wrinkling or bunching of the fabric at either end. So I'm going to pin this and I'm going to sew it real quick. And then we'll move on to putting our bag, continue working on putting our bag together. So we're almost there.